Let me read to you a passage from the second chapter of St. Mark's Gospel, verses 18 to 22. It's the Gospel for the 8th Sunday of Ordinary Time, Year B. St. Mark writes, "Now John's disciples and the Pharisees were fasting. Some people came and asked Jesus, 'How is it that John's disciples and the disciples of the Pharisees are fasting, but yours are not?' Jesus answered, 'How can the guests of the bridegroom fast while he is with them? They cannot, so long as they have him with them. But the time will come when the bridegroom will be taken from them, and on that day they will fast. No one sews a patch of unshrunken cloth on an old garment. If he does, the new piece will pull away from the old, making the tear worse. And no one pours new wine into old wineskins. If he does, the wine will burst the skins, and both the wine and the wineskins will be ruined. No, he pours new wine into new wineskins." That's from Mark chapter 2, verse 18 to 22. In that our Lord refers to himself as the bridegroom. In that passage, our Lord makes use of a term that is full of meaning in describing himself and his relationship with us. He says, as I said earlier, he is the bridegroom. How can the guests of the bridegroom fast while he is still with them? They cannot, so long as they have him with them. But the time will come when the bridegroom will be taken from them, and on that day they will fast. Mark chapter 2, verse 18 to 22. In the Old Testament, especially in the prophets, God repeatedly refers to himself as the bridegroom and his chosen people as his spouse. In the first reading for this Sunday, the 8th Sunday of Ordinary Time, Year B, the prophet Hosea speaks of God betrothing his people with faithfulness. We are his people. Let us think long and often of what God has revealed to us about himself. Like a husband, he is one and there is no other. He cannot be replaced by some other thing in our life. "I am the Lord your God. You shall have no other God in place of me." So our first duty in life is to make sure that we go after nothing that will replace him, and that in our hearts we worship him alone. The God we worship is constant, unchangeable, always faithful and just, always good and holy, without any evil. He is almighty, merciful, and infinitely good, rich in compassion and mercy. All our faith, hope and love then ought be in him. As our Lord put it, quoting the Old Testament, "You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind and with all your strength." There is to be no other God in our life but God, for he is our only bridegroom. Faith in God then, and acceptance of all he has revealed about himself, is our first obligation. And St. Paul teaches that ignorance of God is the source of moral deviations. This ignorance of God will come if we allow our faith in what he has revealed to weaken or be lost. We must be vigilant then. In modern society, people tend to pride themselves on their secular culture, a culture where there is no religious fanaticism. Religion is publicly regarded as a private matter and merely such. But this can encourage a public attitude that turns God and religion into matters of purely personal opinion, with little objective reality about them. The very idea of God is regarded as open to debate and to doubt. It is seen as acceptable even to deny God's existence as an objective fact. So it is that the culture around us and what it permits can contain many temptations to religious doubt. If one were knowingly and willingly to entertain such doubts and deliberately to cultivate them, one could be led into a spiritual blindness which would be sinful. And it is very easy, when hearing such doubts expressed, to go on to entertain or even cultivate them. There are novels, movies, television discussions that express, or at least insinuate, doubt as to the truth of what God has revealed, and as to the truth of what the Church teaches. Freely to entertain or cultivate these doubts, without very serious reasons and without special vigilance, would expose oneself to insidious temptations against faith. One's imagination would be laid open to impressions that could go deep and become a permanent incitement within the mind to disbelieve. Then in moments of inner weakness, one's affected and infected imagination could prompt one to reject this or that doctrine of the faith. An example might be the once popular novel, The Da Vinci Code, a novel full of errors, of course, but which, with its vivid and intriguing plot, might profoundly affect one's religious imagination. That inner stain on the mind might then secretly do its work, predisposing a person against holding the faith. Then could follow disbelief in our Lord and the Church, and then the gift of faith could be lost. Spiritual blindness could follow, which might be very difficult to dispel. We must guard the knowledge of God we have received from our gift of faith in what he has revealed about himself. The case is the same with the virtue of hope. We can be tempted against hope by feelings of giving up and even despair on the one hand, and on the other by presuming on God or on our own capacities. So too, we can be tempted against our love for God by feelings of indifference or lukewarmness, of sloth or of dislike of God. Let us resolve to live resolutely in the knowledge of who God is and what he has revealed as it comes to us in the witness and teaching of the Church. Let us be vigilant against every kind of temptation that may undermine our full acceptance in faith of all that God has revealed to us about himself, our full hope in him, and our love for him.